Hello. Hopefully David and I are live now. So if you are here, please just say hi to say that you're watching, and we can have a look at your comments. But this evening I am joined by the lovely David. Which side is it? This side. This side. It's mirrored. This side. Joined by the lovely David. So those of you who know me will know that David and I do a lot of work together, and I really wanted to spend some proper work time with him since we've all been in lockdown, and I haven't been able to spend much. We spent a little bit, haven't we? But not.
Yeah, we've done bits and pieces. Yeah.
Hi, Jackie. And so this evening felt like a good chance to get together and have a chat and to have a chinwag. And this evening, what we want to talk about is pathways to magic, isn't it, David?
Yeah, pathways to magic.
Yeah. So I suppose what we were just having a chat before we came on, and a lot of this for us, I think, comes down to us discovering ourselves and understanding ourselves.
Yeah.
And both David and I have got very traditional Christian background, effectively, don't we?
Yeah, very. In my case, anyway. And it is. I mean, my spiritual journey has been a long and very varied one. And to end up where I've ended up has been a complete surprise. I never thought I would end up in this space whatsoever.
Yeah.
I mean, far from it. I mean, I couldn't be further away from where I started if I tried. But
Did you want to give people a bit of a? Oh, hi Debbie. Do you want to give people a bit of a background as to your Christian background, David?
Yeah, my Christian background. Right, I mean, born and baptised Anglican, Church of England. First church was a very what we call a middle of the road Anglican church. So nothing particularly special, very plain, very simple. ASB as it used to be in those days, which is the Alternative Service book, or another silly book as we used to call it. So that's where I started off from. I took a little bit of a break in my mid-teens due to moving around through various divorces and moving homes and stuff. Went back to it in my late teens, mainly because I missed the music. We all know that I love a good organ played well. And it's very true. I missed the music, which is why I ended up going back into the church. The church I went to then had gone under a new vicar, new rector, who came from Cape Town, South Africa, and was extremely evangelical for the Anglican Church. And he took that particular church down a very happy clappy route. Very evangelical route, very this is what it says in the Bible, and very Bible led. Which, looking back on it now, seeing as I was 18, 19 at the time, probably didn't do a lot for my self-esteem in those days.
No.
Having not long come out as well. So that was looking back on it, that's probably where a lot of the problems come from. From there, I then went to the extreme Anglo-Catholic end of the Church of England. Now, the Anglo-Catholics are a special, wonderful branch of the Church of England. We pride ourselves on being more Catholic than the Catholics.
Yeah.
Whereas if we could get away with the Mass in Latin, we probably would have done. But bells, smells, Berettas, the lot, full benediction after evening song. Which, do you still do that? Your side of the pond?
No, I don't think Catholics do that. I think a lot of the thing is I've got an Irish background, so a lot of the attitude from the Catholic side was let's get mass done and dusted as soon as possible. that we can go home or go and chat. Or, you know, there was a rush to get mass over and done with. And I know I've heard stories in Ireland of certain priests who would compete over how quickly they could get their service done, because it would mean they would get more parishioners. So yeah. So it was the other way.
So that's where I ended up. I went into community for 3 years. I was a novice monk for 3 years, because I honestly thought that's where my calling was going at the time.
Yeah.
Angela's
just now.
Yeah. So we're talking extreme traditional end for the Anglo-Catholics. So yeah, went into community for 3 years, religious community. Without getting too technical and too bogged down into the separate bits and pieces, it was a Benedictine-based religious order. So that was 4 services every day, including plus a mass. So morning prayer, midday prayer, evening prayer compline, plus mass, plus meditation time. Yes, wore a habit, and absolutely loved it. Absolutely loved it. It was where I learned to meditate and how to meditate, and I still base my meditation practice on that now. It's just started to rain again. Yeah, if you lose the sound, it's because rain on a caravan roof is a bit loud. So yeah, that's how I ended up in Durham as well, because that's where I was based. 3 years, I was 6 months off taking my final vows, when it all fell apart for various reasons. Main one being is because I discovered what men were for again. And as we all know, most of them are useless at that. So,
yes.
So that was that. Came back south, came back home. Tried to get back into parish worship again, going to a traditional Anglo-Catholic church again. Absolutely hated it. The monastic tradition isn't so Bible based. It's spirituality based, so it's the personal journey. So going back into the pews and being told by the priest up top in his pulpit how to do it rankled with me big time, because for the last 3 years I've been finding my own way, and I just could not get back into parish worship. So left the church, stopped going. Didn't go and haven't been back since, and that was 16 years ago. Met my ex-husband David, which some of you will know him, and it was him that introduced me into the mediums and psychics. He was a great fan of the late Colin Fry, and dragged me along to go and see live shows, some of Colin's big shows at the big theatres. And we went and saw Derek Acora and Sally Phillips. And Tony Stockwell. And it kind of tallied with what I knew from my own spiritual journey. It was, we all love Colin. And we all love Colin. So I had that feeling again, like I was beginning to touch something spiritual again. Started to read Colin's books, read all of Derek's books, Tony's books, TJ's books, David Wells's books, and really understood that actually this is despite the whole medium, big state medium thing, this is actually something that I resonate with. This is something that I've always had. So it's still rankled against my Christian upbringing. Mediums are a definite no as far as any of the Christian denominations are concerned. Excuse me. so that really rankled, and it took me a long time to get my head around that bit. But I read the books, started to realize that there was something in it, began to work with my intuition and meditating and that bit. Me and David then split up. I moved out into a place of my own. Met through various means my very first tutor, lovely guy called Jonathan.
Yeah.
Some of you may have known at the time. And he was the one who really started me on learning my craft as a psychic. That was probably, wasn't long after that we met, wasn't it?
No, absolutely. We met at about that time.
Yeah.
And I getting into to spirituality for me was I don't want to say it was quite a different journey. I mean, I was raised Catholic, but my family were Irish, and I think the Irish really struggled to get rid of that rebellious streak where they question and they ask and that type of thing. And there were various conversations in the household, at parties, and my mum's generation were the generation who there was the mass issue with abuse coming out. That was my mum's generation. So I had uncles and family members that had completely turned their back on the church because of the way that they'd been treated, and so there were lots of conversations about Mary Magdalene and who she really was, and lots of questioning of the church. That was, and I think that's really if you go into a Catholic church in Ireland now, you can get some, and they seat hundreds and hundreds, and you'll go in, there'll be barely anyone in there. That's the shift that's happened over there with regard to the church. And it's so as I began to question things, and I remember reading things at school and thinking, and I went to Catholic school, I did, everything was Catholic. I remember up until about 10, I thought everyone was Catholic. I didn't get that people didn't have the first Holy Communion and that type of thing. And I remember starting to form my own ideas in my teens about previous lives making sense based on the teachings of the church, that if the devil fell to the earth and hell was a later creation, which it was, then actually this is where we come to pay our penance. We come back here. Previous lives make sense. So I started to question a lot. A lot of it was led by Mary Magdalene. So I've got to thank Mary Magdalene effectively for really allowing me to question and helping me to question. And I had a big relationship in my late teens all the way through to my mid-20s. And when that relationship split up, I was like, okay, now it's me time. I'm going to do stuff for me. And I started developing myself by myself. I had an issue with going into spiritualist churches. It just something didn't quite sit right with me. And I think probably because my own idea of what a church should be and what I was expecting. And then
that kicks in later on for me, and I'll explain that.
Okay, cool. When I actually started developing with other people, David, it was probably relatively short period after that I met David. Before that, I'd been doing my cards by myself, reading the books, watching the TV shows. Again, Colin Fry, and I really used to enjoy watching Jonathan Edwards as well on the American Lad. And that was how I learned and absorbed stuff, and that was me until I started developing myself. And like I said, it wasn't too long, I can't remember if it was a year or so after that I you and I kind of really met and started our journey together.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting that both of us moved on from the church because we questioned.
Yeah.
I mean, my questioning started when I was in the monasteries. I mean, I did a little bit of theology training whilst I was in the monastery. So I was taught biblical criticism and how to look at the verses, but also look at the wider context as well. And that really played havoc when I was trying to get back into the pews, because they were picking their verses.
Yeah.
for preaching on, without actually giving over the whole message of that particular epistle or that particular gospel. And I knew, I mean, my parish priest, Father Fred, he was a really nice guy, but he was talking a load of bollocks that was about 30 years out of date. And that was why I walked away from the church in the end. And I also began to question the church's background in how they dealt with my people, with gay people.
Yeah.
And that's when I decided that I could no longer have anything to do with organised religion. So it was that's how I moved on from the church.
It makes sense, and I think that for both of us, that journey through spirituality into our own authentic self, into our own authentic magic, effectively. That's like a whole journey itself, isn't it, David?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've often thought that, Goddess willing, this will be my last time round. But it was this lifetime I've kind of seemed to have picked up the threads from lots of previous, and sort of like woven them into my spiritual life now.
Yeah.
Because the way that I've bounced from middle of the road boring church to extreme loony left church to extreme traditional church, leaving the church and moving forward along my path, my spiritual self has always been there right from the get-go in this life. It's not anything that I've ever dropped. But what's interesting to me is that, like I said, because we've questioned. Hey, what are you doing?
There, done. Fiddling with the hardwire.
Oh, right, okay. It's because we've questioned, which is what I would love a lot of the pew-going Christians to do. I would love them to actually sit and question. I would like a lot of the pew sitting spiritual SNU lot to do the same as well. When we probably get onto that in a minute. But so that's it's good to question, because if you blindly accept, then you get absolutely nowhere. You get
what I sometimes find is when you're teaching people and when you're working with people, they're sometimes reticent to ask questions, and it might be actually questioning something that you've taught. It doesn't make sense to them, but absolutely they need to ask those questions, because anyone who's a spiritual teacher who's worth their meat will either be able to explain it in a way that they understand, or they're going to start questioning what they're doing themselves and start questioning, actually, this is what I've been teaching, but does that really make sense? Is that really the way things are?
Yeah, I mean, there is room to question with you within your own particular tradition.
Absolutely.
One of my favourite authors, no longer with us, is Rabbi Lionel Blue. Obviously, a nice Jewish rabbi, Jewish Reform, so evangelical end of the Jewish tradition. But in one of his books, he explains quite well how in his mid-30s he went through a whole period of questioning his faith and the way it was all done and everything. Obviously he stayed within his own tradition, but quite freely admits that he used to pop into mosques and churches to go and pray. As far as he was concerned, whether it was a synagogue or a church or a mosque, it was still a house of God. And he had no problem popping in for a quick 5 minutes, which I thought, and I still think is really lovely. I still think that's really lovely. These days I sort of like hold my breath every time I step over a church threshold.
Like out.
Just in case, all the witches enter into the church. Whoosh! But I always thought that was extremely lovely. Lost me thread then.
I think when I first started to work with spirituality, I found it very easy to connect into, the angels, which you know, gods, goddesses, angels run through every culture. But for me, there was a great safety in connecting into the angels, because I was scared, I was worried. I still had that Catholic rhetoric in the back of my head, which was actually connecting into your own authentic energy and doing your own stuff isn't right. There's danger out there, and you should be scared and you should be worried about all of this dreadful stuff that's out there, which actually in the majority of the cases you really don't even have to worry about. And if you're trained properly and you do everything the right way, it's not an issue at all.
I mean, the angels are the one linking factor between all of the monolithic, all of the Abrahamic faiths. They come up in Judaism, they come up in Christianity, they come up with the Muslims in Islam as well. So they are, and obviously we use them quite a lot. When I say we, I mean the alternative. Alternative faiths.
Free faithers.
Yeah. I mean, I never know quite what to call us these days.
There is, and if anyone can think of the name, I can't remember it now, but it's some that I think it's Omni something or other. I can't remember the full name of it, but there's something.
The Weird and Wonderful Club still works well.
The Weird and Wonderful. Andrew's just was picked up on what you'd said there. Judaism has always had a strong culture of debate. They are exceptional at that, absolutely, and I think that is why Jesus was the preacher he was, because they were allowed to question. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's whole layers of that to Jesus' story, but you were supposed to question. That was acceptable. What as Jackie said, we have religious and secular books and questions of Jewish books. Debate curiosities are not squashed. We're encouraged to quest. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
You know,
far much more so than the Christians are.
Absolutely.
Far much more so than the Christians are. And if you have ever done any Old Testament reading or anything like that, then you can see that straight off. But it wasn't until the Catholics.
Omniism. Nicky said omniism.
Oh, right, okay.
Thanks, Nick.
Yeah. It wasn't until Rome really started to exert its power that we were given the party line, and this is what you will believe, and what we say is right, and the old men of the church started to rule the place.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So sort of, I think for both of us, stepping out of that box actually really properly has been a journey in itself. There's one thing stepping out, and there's one thing stepping into your own power and into your own authenticity, and that in itself is a journey. And I think that it doesn't matter for me whether or not you've got a formal religious background, because of society, because of the fact that we are a Christian country effectively. You will have sewn into your background, into your inner rhetoric, into the stuff that you've picked up from society, that actually doing anything by yourself, angels are good. We know angels are good. That's it. As long as you connect into that, you're fine. Like, don't try and step out of your box. You should be scared about talking to dead people, and all of that type of thing. And I really had to go through layers myself of undoing that. See you later, Nick. Of really undoing that. I mean, it was one thing connecting in psychically, it was one thing connecting into angels. The dead person thing, that grew with confidence with me.
Once I'd got my whole head around that this was really something so outside of my comfort zone at the time, so outside of anything that I was brought up with, so outside anything that I knew. Once I started to learn and find my own way along it, I was actually pretty accepting right from the get-go. I think at the time I was searching for something to replace the Christianity bit with. And at the time, the spiritualists and the spiritualist church offered that. Because they offered a structure.
Yeah.
To a degree. They had 7 principles.
Yeah.
Everything was meant to hang on. They had a church.
Yeah.
As in building, which
Yeah.
was important at that stage. And most of them for me were pretty liberal thinking.
Yes.
Most of it was rhetoric, I've since found out, but they weren't particularly homophobic, they weren't particularly racist. We're all children of the universe, of the spirit, blah blah blah. And that at that time that really appealed to me.
Yeah.
So the whole talking to dead people thing, once I realised that I could do it, wasn't so much of a problem for me. Especially when I'd started to get through. It wasn't even people that I knew. I was sat with my best mate, and his mum came through, who passed when he was early 20s, and able to give him the information that I gave him, absolutely confirming that it was her, and seeing the look of surprise and joy on his face, that was enough.
Yeah.
I was sold then. Yeah, so that was good.
Yeah, I think that we talk about this a lot, about how healing the messages are, about how healing that side is. And I think for both of us, because we both come in the empath vibration, the journey, the spiritual journey, is a healing journey. It's one of developing yourself and expanding yourself and healing yourself. And those messages themselves are healing. And that's the vein, that's the way that we give those messages out.
Absolutely.
And,
for me, it always was a case of, this is the next step on my path.
Yeah.
I knew I was a spiritual person. I knew I connected in with spirit.
Yeah.
And this just felt right. It was, it wasn't so rigid as coming from the Christian views. You could, to all intents and purposes, set your own path and explore, and be encouraged to explore, which ultimately proved to be its undoing for me. But it was I always accepted that this was just the right step on my path. I started to meet the right people. I met Jonathan, then Penny, then you, and then Debbie and Annette and Colin and Nikki and everybody else. So it all kind of fitted. Yeah. And I was just happily going along where it went. Yeah. Which was absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think meeting other people who are like-minded and on the same pathway is part of the joy of the journey. Absolutely. And it tells you that you're on the right way. So even those times when you have those wobbles and you think, am I doing the right thing? No, this feels right. This absolutely feels like the right thing for me. And as you say, you don't necessarily know where it's going. All you know is that you're taking the next step and you're trusting that this is the next step and this is the next step. And I don't know where this staircase is going, but it's taken me somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, what's interesting, I mean, we've spoken about this lots of times. Yeah, over the years, but I've only just seen it. I think for me, it was a little bit easier because I'd come from the monastic tradition and was more used to the idea of a spiritual path. Yeah, it was easier for me than it was for you. Yes. And I hadn't quite seen that before.
That actually that makes a lot of sense, because it felt like more of a wrestle away for me from that, because that was the all that I had and all that I knew, and that faith. And I mean, quite honestly, I did consider converting to Anglican just that I could be an Anglican preacher, a female priest, and get married.
We did allow those, apparently.
I knew that I wanted kids. So like a nun, that really wasn't ever going to happen. That, you know, that wasn't going to happen. But, you know, and I seriously considered that on, even after I was married, I seriously considered that at one stage, because I kind of felt that I needed the outside structure and I needed that title. What I needed was somebody to tell me that I was worthy of being a priestess, or I was worthy of, you know, being spiritually connected or being a spiritual teacher, that I was worthy, and I still needed the outside approval. And as time went on and I grew in confidence, and as I went on my own healing journey about all of that, you know, all of that, the inner confidence, inner trust, you know, faith in yourself, all of that big stuff. And it is big stuff, you know, you do it on one level and you're like, oh my God, with spirituality, there's a whole other level of this. This isn't outside confidence, this is deep confidence in your calling and in your pathway and all of that stuff. And as I built confidence and healed myself, that slowly stripped away until I was at a point, probably I can't remember how many years ago it was now, but a few years ago I was like, okay, I need to really deep dive into facing some of the fears that I knew that I still had. I knew that I had trouble grounding, and the reason why I had trouble grounding is because I still had a fear of earth energies, and that had been a really big thing with the Catholic Church, is that, you know, paganism was wrong, and, you know, you shouldn't lead yourself in your own pathway because you don't know about all of this dangerous stuff and you can't control it, and it's safe to be within the church because the church can control that. So I knew that I had to deep dive, and I went and did a course which Caroline Mitchell ran at that time with Anne, and it was that year was kind of like broke me and put me back together in terms of a deep connection into the goddess, and like not caring about that connection, a deep connection into myself, you know, not just questioning and noticing that I had these fears, but actually breaking the fears open and going, oh God, it's not that bad, like, why was I even worried? But the more I deep dived into myself, and the more that I just put my faith in whatever step forward spiritually for me to interact with, and for me, that there was always going to be a lesson. It might have been a higher lesson, it might have been a very earthly lesson, there was always going to be a lesson in it. And that really allowed me to sort of connect into my energy on a whole other way, because, you know, this is something you and I have discussed many times, is, you know, you think you're a good Catholic and then you realize that actually you're quite a good witch, you know, candles, incense, you know, all of that stuff is, you know, and how many of us as spiritual people have got our incense burning, and you're wafting your sage or whatever it is that you're doing, you know, you've got your candles out and you've got your smelly essential oils out and you've got all of that stuff because it makes you feel good, and it does make you feel good because it is blooming magical, and then you're like, oh, okay, so this is the stuff that and it is still the stuff I enjoy. You know, nothing better than being on holiday and finding a little old Catholic church that you can go and sit in, not in front of the Jesus, in front of the Mary. You know, that is my bit, is going up and just sitting with Mary for half an hour and getting some peace.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's connecting into the goddess. That's the goddess within the church.
I mean, I still love visiting cathedrals and stuff like that. I still feel very at home in cathedrals.
Yeah.
Especially those that with monastic foundation.
Yeah.
Places like Durham, Westminster, you know, places like that. So that's still there. So I've lost my thread again. I just want to go back a little bit, because there's a couple of things that you just brought up that
go for it. Absolutely.
Your need for the validation, either through the priesthood or through something else. I understand where you're coming from on that, because I did feel that in a certain way as well. I never wanted to be a priest. I was always quite happy to be a lay brother. Didn't particularly want to get ordained. I would have gone up to what we call deacons, what you would have called curates. But that's as far as I would have gone. I wouldn't have gone for the full priest. But I understand wanting that validation from, you know, the wider church that you'll get in this. So I totally get that. I also wondered for a minute then whether that was also a feminist issue for you.
No, and it's funny because as you started talking about this, I thought, I wonder if that's to do with actually being a woman, and part of that is needing, in some way, not in a conscious way, on some deep level, needing that as a woman, needing to be led, and that outside approval needed as a woman. So
that crossed my mind as well. And then and absolutely, being a good witch and a good Catholic isn't far off from the tools that we use now as witches. I mean, I love a smoke, an incense filled chancel just as I love anything else. But we've joked many a time that the early church nicked so many of our stuff. To where they built the churches, because we've come across sites where we know that a church has been placed upon a sacred space for the
and Winchester, which is quite local to us, is probably a really big one. You've got the old, what they called the Druid stones, that have now been entirely moved from the cathedral site, but it was built right on top of a Druidic site. St. Catherine's Hill, again, there was a Catholic church on top of there, and you and I have been up there lots of times, using the ley lines and all the sacred energy that's up there. Absolutely, the church really did build its foundations on magic. So
absolutely, even to the timing of the festivals. It was not so much the one that's coming up for midsummer, for summer solstice, but Yule for Christmas.
Absolutely.
Easter. They are all based on old tradition, old tradition craft, sabbats and stuff. So it's.
And actually what they did was slotted the festivals in on the ones that resonated and kind of energetically made the most sense. And in doing
that was done on purpose for my church history.
Absolutely.
The medieval church chose those dates on purpose, as a look. We're not so different from the old ways. Look
how easy it is to convert. You can still have your party here and this celebration here, and absolutely.
So
and actually, it brought a lot of that magic into the church. If anyone sat through a Catholic church service, it is repetition of chanting, and it's basically a lot of spell work. A lot of people doing certain symbols on yourself, or saying the same words the same way. And if anyone has had the pleasure or the displeasure, depending on how you feel about it, of sitting down and doing a full rosary, which I have partaken. It's it is almost hypnotic and trance-like as you're repeating the same words over and over and over, and you're getting yourself. And honestly, you've never done a rosary until you've done it in Ireland. I've never heard women, and it is mostly women, do a Hail Mary as fast as that. Like it was, I was just so impressed by it.
Absolutely. When I was up north, when I was in Durham,
transfer of energy via the hands. Peace with you. Absolutely.
When I was up north in Durham, my particular monastery had very close links with most of the traditional Catholic parishes in the diocese, and we used to go out every now and again, and I got very friendly with the priests, and would go to their various high days and holiday services, and watching the old girls sit there with their rosaries before the start of the service, clicking away on their beads, and honestly, they didn't stop for breath.
No, honestly, you've never seen anything like it. You've never seen anything like it. I've got, in fact, my daughter brought down my rosary beads, and she said they belong in your room, and she was right. I'd had my rosary beads that I picked up from Cove Church many years ago, like bought from the little nun running the shop and all the rest of it. And that's a lovely cathedral if you're ever in Ireland. So she said they should go in this room, and I was right. They should go in this room.
Absolutely.
I've got, don't get me wrong, I've got some Christian, I mean, Jesus is sat behind me, but I've got some Christian stuff in here. I just haven't had anything with a crucifix because, at some point that crucifixion felt very wrong for me, and that focus on Jesus's death and the slant that was put on Jesus' death didn't, resonated with me in such a way that it was actually abhorrent. So I'm actually at a stage now where, my goddess, who I've got the beads next to my goddess on the shelf behind the camera. So
absolutely.
they go together. They absolutely go together.
My rosary is on my altar at home.
Yeah.
It's there. Yeah, occasionally I still use it because it helps focus during meditation.
Yes.
Which is the point of it. So yes, I still use it, not necessarily with in the traditional way, but I still use it. And I think it's important for me to honour where I came from.
Yeah.
So that's the other reason why it's on my altar now. As much as I dislike the Christian Church and all it stands for, it is part of my history, a part of my path.
Absolutely.
And I do honour it. Yeah, absolutely.
And I feel the same way. Like, I thank the church for giving me. I've got a huge amount of Bible knowledge. I could have some wonderful arguments with people, and actually you could outdo me on some of the arguments that you could probably have with people misquoting text and all the rest of it. Those are fun conversations that you have in the street. They seem to do for fun.
I was reminded of this very, very recently. As you know, the latest version, the latest season of Queer Eyes just dropped.
Yes.
And the story that Pastor Noah tells about the centurion, he's got it absolutely bang on, by the way. If you go back,
were you aware of that story? Were you aware of the misinterpretation? Yes, so for those of you who are watching who haven't seen the first episode from the latest series of Queer Eye, I put it on the other day, and Alice was like, my 5-year-old, why don't you watch some TV for yourself? And I was like, yeah, I will do. Like, thank you. And I put this on, and it was about this preacher Noah who was running a Lutheran church in the States, and he's an openly gay priest, and they're embracing that over there within that particular Christian church. And he told the story of the centurion. In the Bible, the translation from, I'm presuming it was, I don't know which book it's in, David, so I don't know if it's Aramaic or if it was originally written in Greek.
Originally in Greek.
Was it Greek? So the translation was turned into a centurion bought his slave to be healed. And actually what the original Greek was, the centurion brought his beloved. Yeah. The centurion bought his boyfriend to be healed by Jesus. And Jesus didn't say anything. He didn't do anything. He healed him. There was no judgment. There was nothing. And, we need to remember that homosexuality was acceptable within Rome and within Greece as well at that, prior to that. So it's, hearing that and knowing that the church at some point chose a very different, slave is a very different word to beloved. It's a very different word. And to hear that and the fact that story was somehow slipped in, and I expect the only reason that it slipped in is because at that point somebody changed the word to get the story in, at least the stories in the Bible. So it was just amazing.
There are examples of that throughout the Bible, where the misinterpretation from the Greek, and as with everything, as our understanding of ancient Greek has moved forward, so we've been able to put better translations on the original Greek. But that is one of them. I'm also reminded of the stories of King David and Jonathan in the Old Testament. Although that's more a case of very bad hero worship rather than anything sexual. Paul only had a problem because with the anti-homophobic stuff in Romans, because of the links it had with the pagan temples.
Interesting. Okay.
That's the only reason why Paul brings it up in Romans. I think it's Romans.
That would make sense.
Something's telling me it's in Romans. It was because of the links with the pagan temples. So there are examples of that throughout the Bible. Which, if you actually go and do your research and look at it, or do a couple of really good Bible study courses. All of this we've been pointed out to you.
It's interesting because the last priest that I had, who actually married Matt and I, and actually baptized Dylan. And it actually wasn't until I had Alice and it came up that I hadn't told you, but I'd been thinking about doing Alice's naming day. And you said, this is what was being shown, which was the naming day out of, the witch, the show with the witches on, the sisters. Charmed. I was going to say Enchanted, but Charmed. And so obviously you picked up on that, and it was almost the permission I needed to do it. That priest used to teach Bible history. So he would do some blowaway sermons that is one of the reasons why I'm sure that he was sent out to Africa for a long time, because he was a real troublemaker. You know, they got rid of him and far out they could do. Proper Irishman. And he would teach history. So I remember him having a conversation, and it's nothing to do with the Bible verse that had been read that month. His homily was about how when Jesus spoke about divorce being wrong, this is what divorce was like at this time. He was saying divorce at that time was wrong because it was a woman could divorce a man, and there was so many reasons why it wasn't balanced. And as well as I do, that's because somebody was getting divorced within the church and people were going mad about it. Yeah. So that priest and listening to him, that Andrew's actually said she really learned to connect him with the divine via the church, and that was really good. Mm-hmm. And I agree with that. I learned so much from the church, and it switches over so well into spiritual work, especially when you start getting into the craft. Yeah, and
I totally agree with Angela on that. I mean, I had one of my biggest problems when I left the church was thinking of God in the masculine. Yeah. And especially as father. Mm. Through personal experience, my own relationship with my own father isn't particularly wonderful. So I had a whole problem, and I've been lacking a father. I mean, I do have a father figure and have had for a very long time, and I love him to bits, but he was always my stepdad, so slightly different relationship. But I had huge problems with the whole God the Father thing. I still have problems with it now, which again is why I probably accepted the goddess and especially the goddess in all her forms a lot easier than I ever did accepting God the Father.
That took me a really long time. I think probably this deep dive work that I did a few years ago, that was when I really stood in it strongly for me and went, okay, God wasn't the Father. God was just an energy. And, and my understanding's changed. The universe and the energy that binds us, it is an intelligent energy, the Holy Spirit, whatever, chi, prana, the ray, whatever it is that you want to call that energy that binds us. But that's different to connecting in, and I think that the understanding that we come from a planet, we don't our souls come up here from up there, our humanity comes from here. And I think when you're grounded and you're grounded into your humanity, and you are a person who absolutely cares about other people and cares about what's going on in the world and cares if other people catch coronavirus and cares about anti-racism and get into the roots of all of that, and cares about homophobic behavior and wants change on that. If you're a human who sits in that and is active in that and active in your life in that, then the goddess makes sense. The goddess for me is grounded because she's your connection into our humanity. We spring forth from the planet. Our physicality only comes because of the planet, and that kind of connection into her for me has really got really strong over the last few years. It's since I've really sort of aligned into myself, and you and I were talking about this earlier about aligning into your authentic energy. And actually your authentic energy is not necessarily going to be Christianity, because David and I are both white. Christianity and a lot of that stuff is from Israel and Jerusalem and from those areas. then brought into Rome. And if you want to talk about, you know, appropriation of cultures, you know, that could be applied to the Christian church, absolutely.
Yeah.
So what I've personally found is, as I've connected more into myself, and as I've gone, oh, okay, I like being Catholic because I like candles and I like making up my own incense and burning it, and actually I'm really happy. And I remember ordering my first big box of proper magic candles and getting them through, rather than picking up the odd one and doing the odd little bit here and there. I'd ordered a whole box and it came through, and I was so excited, and Alice was really excited as well about this book, the little witch that she is, this box of candles. And I was like,
this... my own, by the way.
Yay!
Candles, that is.
That connection, that for me was me. That really did, you know, that excited me so much that I knew that was right. This was, you know, if I'm going to be unapologetically me, then I need to do that with my spirituality as well. So that connection into the goddess, and like you say, the goddess in all of her forms. You know, I did a reading for somebody the other day, and the goddess in all her forms was coming through. I was like, oh my God, like, what are you connecting into? I was like, okay, so I've had this through this. The goddess in all of her forms was there. So I knew that her connection and her groundedness was there as well, because I honestly don't think, unless you're grounded, you know, so this stuff for me does feel earthier, it does feel grittier, and grittier might be exchanged for the word dirtier as well. And I think that's where people then end up sometimes having an issue aligning that to a pretty spiritual love and light thing, and actually that some of this craft work is grittier, and I think some people struggle with the alignment between those two things.
I mean, for me, it's very real.
Yes.
When I'm doing craft work and spell casting, it's very real. Especially on the use of some of the correspondence, especially with herbs. You know, the energy I get off those is the same as you get off crystals, which I've only just put the link on that fairly recently. It is much more real to me than some of the other energy work that we've done in the past.
Yeah.
And I think for me, using tools has made it that much more real.
Yeah.
Rather than sat there visualizing light coming out the top of my head, going up, whatever. You know, give me something that I can hold and fondle, for want of a better phrase. But you know, because that's the type. I'm not a very visual person, you know, and I need, and this is the empath kicking it. I can feel it, very happily, but trying to actually visualize it is difficult for me. So give me something that I can hold, something I can play with. Has always worked better.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's interesting the way you came to the goddess as well, because that is, as always, it's always been one of our themes that we've always ended up at the same points, but have gone there completely different ways. You know, when I first started out, and I've told you this story before, when I first started out 10 years ago, 11 years ago, one of my first visions that I had during meditation was of the goddess. She was the first deity that ever appeared to me. She made it very plain to me at that time not to go down the craft route, and I've kept away from it until the last couple of years or so. I understand why she said that, because I had to learn the subtleties in energy, and how to use it. I also had to learn that craft is not the answer to everything. It's a big answer to a lot of things, but not to everything. Also, I had to learn how to discern when to use your craft.
Absolutely.
You know, at that stage in my life, I would have gone around cursing everybody and everything. I
can see why she said no.
Sometimes just for the heck of it. A lot of times because I had personal issues with that particular person that needed to be sorted out. I mean, bearing in mind I've just split up after a long-term relationship, and things in the family at that time weren't particularly good. So I had to learn how to use the energy and really get a grasp on the threefold rule, and everything else before I was allowed to start walking down the craft path. Otherwise it would have backfired on me big time.
I think I think you're quite right. I think you need that balance. So for me, you know, going down the Reiki route, however that plays out in your life, it doesn't mean that you have to be a Reiki healer. For me, when you go through your Reiki attunements, that's part of your Reiki journey, which will develop into lots of different spiritual growth outlets. That's for me what the Reiki journey is a journey of expansion. And having that balanced up against some of the earthier stuff makes sense, because, you know, I was talking to somebody who David and I both know, and, you know, I spoke to you about this as well, that, you know, you do a lot of this work up here, you do a lot of your healing work up here, but actually it takes so long to get it through onto the physical. It takes, you know, you've got to work it down from the spiritual to the mental to the emotional down to the physical layer. And actually doing this healing work alongside doing some physical manifestation work, where you're working with the herbs, which actually work with the elements being the building blocks of nature, whether you're looking at that from a magical point of view, or you understand that I've read recently some guy, Roger Moon's work, who's a quantum chemist, who's proving the platonic solids exist within the structure of everything. You know, that's, you know, he's proving they exist. So, you know, when it doesn't matter what way you're working with this, the real magic, the real matrix of the universe, the physical matrix, working with it brings that stuff that you've done up here, it brings it into reality. And having that balance of your Wiccan, your pagan, your earth witchcraft side alongside your healing, it's a really good balance.
It's a wonderful balance. I mean, I totally get what you mean by people having done work up on their spiritual stuff and then having problems bringing it down into everyday life. Yeah. We all know my pet hate of Sunday Christians. Yeah. And Sunday spiritualists. Yes. You know, because they turn up in church, sit in the pew, listen very nicely, you know, recite their prayers and their confessions and go and get forgiven and blessed and all the rest of it. Yeah. Walk out and they're still the arseholes that they walked in. Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm not saying that's just Christians. I've found that in the spiritual churches as well. Yes, there's a lot of people out there like it, a lot of people. Whereas what I'm finding with the craft stuff, and I use the term craft because I don't term myself as a Wiccan. I'm a witch, and it's, you know, it's craft stuff that I do. Especially working at the moment with the lunar energies and learning the moon cycles, and actually concentrating on bringing that stuff into my life. Yeah. To try and be a better person and stop being such a grumpy git, and you know, being nice to other people and everything. I mean, it's hard going, but it's personal development for one thing, which, you know, is a big favourite topic of mine, and something that has stalled for me for the last 3 or 4 years. But that's only because I spent way too long getting over my heart attack, and I still am to a degree, but now is the time to move forward from that. So it's absolutely, but it's been an interesting thing. Angela's just made this comment here that, you know, she did a Reiki, went back to the church. There's a voyage of discovery within the church, and then she's come back again. So that makes absolute sense, Angela. You know, the Reiki went, okay, now go back to the church, sort out all that stuff that you need to from that, move yourself on, and then you're walking into your own magic, you're walking into your own discovery. Hey, Claire, you know, it's, for me, there is something very authentic about connecting into your own energy and connect, you know, it is a representation of you. And you know, I did say to you before, we were chatting about
I think a lot of the time as spiritual people in this country, we end up borrowing so much from other cultures because our spiritual culture is Christianity, which is again a borrowed spiritual pathway. When we start connecting into ourselves, we start being grounded. We're actually grounded into our local energy. We're grounded into where we are. You're then going to find that you're connecting into local deities. You're connecting into your local spirits, the ley lines, all of that stuff. And as you connect into that, you're connecting into the authentic energy and reaffirming your identity as, a British person. And as a British person, my history is, my mum's Irish. So, I've got the Celtic stuff running through my blood. And a lot of British people do, the ancient Brits, we all, before, Christianity came to this country, we were all worshipping our local deities. That was our religion. And, a lot of that is lost.
Yeah, that is something I am really looking forward to when I finally get up north. Is connecting in with whatever is in the area in South Yorkshire. Yeah. I mean, I've done a little bit of research, and we all know about Mother Shipton and everything. That's roughly that area, but not quite.
Yeah.
So it'd be really, and I've already done a little bit of energy work whilst we were doing the move and everything, and I know roughly what is around the village.
Yeah.
That we're moving to. Which they have moved to, and I will eventually.
When you're allowed out.
Yeah, when I'm allowed out. But I already know that it's because where we've moved to, it's an old pit village.
Right.
And there's a hell of a lot of energy up there, a lot of resentment, a lot of bad feeling.
Yeah.
Obviously from the miners and what Maggie did. But the earth energies up there, in the old times, me and you would have gone up there and said, right, this needs clearing.
Yeah.
This needs getting rid of. It's bad energy. It needs to go. It's blood energy, for one thing. It's where men gave their lives in the pit, and the earth has accepted that as the sacrifice, and is now basically saying, right, well, what do you want me to do with this energy?
Yeah.
And of course, nobody's ever gone up there and said, right, we'll do this, because they didn't know how. So it'd be really interesting to see what I come up with when I get up there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it will be, and I think as you can. I mean, I found it where I've moved to here. I did a major clearance on the house, which actually opened up the whole area. And I've really connected into the local guardian of the local area. This is a hill. There is a ley line, a minor ley line running through it, unsurprisingly. And some of the stuff that's happened on this site hasn't been particularly nice. And I haven't healed it with any intent. I've just sent healing, and it's opened everything up. And the local guardian of the area, who I had no idea was here, why I hadn't connected into her, now makes sense. She then was then able to step forward. So I've had to do it in 2 lots here, because there's a lot here. Even the motorway, carving its way just down the road is an injury on the local area. So absolutely.
I mean, it's one of those interests. Sorry, I keep interrupting you. Because when we did the field work last year, well, we did some out in the sticks and some in Winchester. You might remember this from when you lived in Southampton, but definitely when I was in and out of Portsmouth all the time, the energy around the water places, and especially those that were bombed during the war, is really fascinating and worth getting to know and getting to to play with.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I had some very good nights walking around Portsmouth with friends, and just reading the energies, same as we did during the summer. This was bombed and that was bombed, and the energy and stuff. So it's all spirit. This is what we mean by spirit of place. So
absolutely right. I think we're probably done, David. I don't know about you, but that kind of feels like it's brought everything back round.
Okay.
So
I mean, as per usual, look, we've got onto a tangent and we could keep going forever.
I know that this is my my worry is that we had gone onto a tangent and that would have gone on forever. So yeah. So I think we've probably come back round on the original topic, but actually that might be something worth talking about at another point, is talking about energy or you know, spiritual, whatever, you know, talking about the earth and level lines and that type of thing. What has Angela said? Strikes me that the energy of Christianity is just one type of important way. Absolutely. You know, there's so many different types of energy there to connect into and to work with. And you quite often find, as David and I have found, is that actually they're quite often the same energy and a similar energy. It's just being tapped.
You're absolutely right there, Angela. The energy of Christianity, what the core beliefs of Christianity: love your neighbour, do the right thing, be there for other people, don't judge, are absolutely core values which we've carried on into our craft tradition.
Yeah.
Which we're already in the craft tradition, actually.
Yes.
Yeah, that is all very important work. You're absolutely bang on that, Angela, absolutely.
Jackie said, I think Claire keeps, I think all Claire's stuff keeps freezing, but thanks for your interesting conversation. She spoke to experience. Thanks for sharing. Reiki has opened up her curiosity for more, even if that's possible. Yeah, always question. If somebody tells you not to ask a question, you need to run the other way, because they don't get it.
Oh, absolutely, Jackie. I mean, as no, that's the same for you. Our Reiki 2s is really when the intuition and the energy work and our psychic energies really started flowing, was on our Reiki 2s. So yeah, you're absolutely right on that, Jackie. Absolutely.
Love that. Okay, so thank you very much for joining us, guys. Thank you to David.
Thank you very much.
That was fun. Nikki and I have planned an impromptu conversation about love and light, the truth behind the phrase love and light on Sunday. We might have an axe to grind. So yeah, there might be an axe grinding session on Sunday. Thanks, Viv, for joining us. Thank you. So if you guys are around Sunday evening, Nikki and I are doing an impromptu one around that. And this is something David and I have spoken about loads as well. So I know David's on the same page on that one. You know, about the truth of it. What does it really mean? And, you know, does it really mean anything when it passes most people's lips? You know, that type of thing. You know, again, being authentic with your words and all of that fun stuff. I've got Divine Service will be next month now, which will be the first Sunday of the month. So that will be my Divine Healing Service that I do. And I've got couple of workshops coming up, which are online ones. If any of you guys fancy it, please have a look at my events. I've got a couple, and I've tried to price them well, because I know that it's tough at the moment. So I have tried to price them as best that I can. So please go and have a look at my events if you feel like it. And I think that's it. I think that it's it. So thanks so much for joining us, guys. Have a lovely evening. Have a lovely weekend. And I hope that, you know, the sun comes out a little bit more for us. And we'll catch up soon. Bye. Bye.